Dear viewers, Embassy of India in Washington, D.C. and its outreach initiative, India Student Hub, welcome you all to this special event celebrating the incredible Indian heritage of Buddhism and its message of peace to humanity. Our expert today is one of the foremost authorities on Buddhism, Professor B.N. Hebar from George Washington University, who is also the Executive Vice President of International Buddhist Association of America. He will discuss these aspects with Dr. Pravina Rodriguez, postdoctoral fellow from Santa Clara University. Let us begin the event with a message from Ambassador of India to the United States, His Excellency Shri Taranjit Singh Sandhu.
Namaskar. Professor Heber, my young friends, I am happy to speak at this event by Indian students in the United States on India's Buddhist heritage. I compliment your interest in understanding this important aspect of India's history and culture. Gautama Buddha has been amongst the greatest gift from India to the world. Buddha is synonymous with service and dedication, and his message of peace and service is universal. He has inspired the humanity to take the path of compassion, universal responsibility, and welfare. Buddhism originated in India more than 2,500 years ago and now is practiced in more than 100 countries in the world. Under the leadership of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, Government of India has undertaken key initiatives to strengthen the historical ties and people-to-people linkages weaved through common thread of Buddhism. These include assistance to several countries in the neighborhood and Southeast Asia through construction and renovation of Buddhist monasteries, capacity development, cultural exchanges, archaeological cooperation, reciprocal exposition of Buddha's relics, and strengthening engagement of Buddhist scholars and clergy. To facilitate the travel of international tourists to Buddhist stupas and viharas in India, Government of India is developing first transnational tourist circuit in 21 states across India, in addition to the Buddhist circuit. In 2020, an international airport at Kushinagar, Uttar Pradesh was inaugurated, easing the travel of followers of Buddhism to the sacred city where Gautama Buddha attained nirvana. In my past assignments in Colombo, I have been personally witness to and part of these efforts. Here in the United States, many of our American friends, prominent institutions, and the diaspora have keen interest in teachings of Buddha and Buddhist art. Embassy and the consulates have connected with them and are facilitating ways to strengthen ties. Friends, Buddha's message becomes even more relevant in the complex world of today, where global challenges, including the pandemic and violence, have brought tragedy and suffering to many. Buddha urged the human beings should consistently strive to overcome difficult situations and that getting tired is not an option. Today, we need to work together and relentlessly in addressing these challenges. As India has consistently argued, the way forward is that of dialogue and diplomacy. I will conclude with the words of Mahatma Gandhi. Buddha taught us to defy appearances and trust in the final triumph of truth and love. World would be a better place if we all follow this mantra. I wish you all the very best. Thank you. Namaskar.
Thank you, Ambassador Sandhu. Welcome again, everyone. I am your host, Dr. Pravina Rodriguez. I am postdoctoral fellow at Santa Clara University in California. I am also associate editor for the Journal of Dharma Studies, which came out of the Dharma Academy of North America, an association of scholars and researchers on Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jaina studies in North America. We have a very special guest today. I have the pleasure of speaking with Dr. B.N. Heber. Dr. Heber has a PhD from the University of Utrecht in Netherlands, a doctorate in divinity from SGUI, and a doctorate in literature from the University of South Africa. He has lectured extensively on Hinduism and Buddhism in North America, Europe, and Asia. He has trained Fairfax County Public Schools high school teachers on how to teach Buddhism, Taoism, Confucianism, and Hinduism in the classroom. He has lectured at Virginia Theological Seminary, at the Smithsonian Resident Associate Program at NYU and Harvard Medical Schools on bioethics. He has advised the Pentagon Board of Chaplains on Hindu religious matters prior to the first U.S.-Iraq War. He has received numerous awards, authored several articles. I will not attempt to list all of his accomplishments here. But most importantly, he is the executive vice president to the International Buddhist Association of America, called IBA. So we really have the best person to talk about India's Buddhist heritage here. Welcome, Dr. Heber. It's an honor.
Thank you, Dr. Rodriguez. Namaste.
So, Dr. Heber, may I please invite you to first present for about 30 minutes or so, and then we will have a time for conversation and questions on the basis of your presentation. Please go ahead.
Indeed, thank you. So we're going to talk about India's Buddhist heritage, and this is sort of what I would call an academic style heritage presentation to the Indian students and the American students of Indian origin in the United States of America. So let's get started in this regard. Let's look at the 9 holiest places of Buddhist pilgrimage. Except for the very first one, the birthplace of the Buddha, which is in Nepal, the remaining 8 are all in India. Lumbini in Nepal is the birthplace of the Buddha, and the birth having taken place in the year 563 before the Common Era. The second major place is Bodh Gaya, located in the Bihar state of India. It is the enlightenment place of the Buddha, which took place in the year 528 BC. The third holy place is Sarnath, which is located in Varanasi, at the Deer Park, the famous, and of course that is located in the state of Uttar Pradesh, is the place where Lord Buddha delivered his first Dharma talk or sermon in the year 528 BC, where he expounded the 4 basic teachings of Buddhism. Then the fourth holy place is Sankasa, sometimes called Sankisa or Sankasya, as the case may be, also located in Uttar Pradesh. I believe it's not too far from Mathura. And that's the place where the Buddha is said to have come down from the Tushita heaven after explaining the most complex of all the Buddhist doctrines, the Abhidharma, to his mother, the late Queen Mahamaya. Then you have the fifth holy place of Buddhism, which is Shravasti in Sanskrit and Savatthi in Pali, also located in Uttar Pradesh. It's a place where some of the eminent disciples of the Buddha came from. People like the Lady Vishakha, people like the very wealthy Sudatta, who was also known as Anathapindaka. And more importantly, the Buddha spent 22 rainy season retreats at Savatthi or Shravasti. Then we have Sanchi. This is located in Madhya Pradesh. I believe it's not too far from Bhopal, which is the capital of the present day state of Madhya Pradesh. And this is the place where the stupa containing the ashes of the 2 most eminent disciples of the Buddha, the Venerables Shariputra and Mahamoggallana. He is known as Shariputra in Sanskrit and Sariputta in Pali, and Mahamoggallana in Sanskrit and Mahamoggallana in Pali. And these two disciples of the Buddha predeceased him by 6 months. And they actually passed away literally 15 days apart from each other. That is the Venerable Sariputta and Mahamoggallana. So their ashes and their mortal remains are enshrined there at Sanchi. Then we have the next one is Kushinagara, which is also located in the state of Uttar Pradesh, I believe not too far from the modern city of Gorakhpur. And it's the place of the passing away of the Buddha in the year 483 BC. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, Prime Minister Modi recently inaugurated an international airport there. So he's well aware of the Buddhist heritage of India and why all these places are important. Then the last two in the list are Rajagaha, known in Sanskrit as Rajagriha, and of course the modern name is Rajagir, located in the Bihar state of India, and it is the place of the first Buddhist council that took place during the rainy season after the passing away of the Buddha in the year 483 BC. And Vaisali, also known as Vaishali, also located in Bihar, is the place of the second Buddhist council that took place in the year 386 BC, a century after the Mahaparinirvana of the Buddha. So these are the 9 holiest places of Buddhist pilgrimage. As you can see, there are 4 cardinal teachings of Buddhism going back to the Buddha himself. The theoretical teachings are the 3 marks of existence, known in Pali as Tilakkhana or Trilakshana in Sanskrit. Then the 12-fold wheel of causality, the Dvadasha Nidana Chakra in Pali, or the Dvadasha Nidana Chakra in Sanskrit. And then you have the 4 noble truths, the Chatura Arya Satya, or the Chatur Arya Satya, as the case may be. These 3 are the theoretical teachings. And then you have the 4th teaching, which is the practical teaching, which is the Arya Atta Visuddhi Magga, or the Arya Ashta Visuddhi Marga, which is the Noble Eightfold Path. The 4 noble truths may be divided into 2 aspects. The first 2 truths are what you might call the pessimistic side of the 4 noble truths. That the Buddha firstly wants us to realize that suffering exists in the context of life, and that these sufferings are not something random, that sufferings have causes. So in this sense, one might call them the pessimistic because it tells you what the nature of life is. But then he doesn't stop there. He provides a solution to that. And that's the optimistic side. And the word optimism has to be taken very carefully because he's pointing out a spiritual optimism, albeit in practical terms. So the third noble truth is that you don't have to put up with suffering, that it can be stopped. And then finally, the most important of them all, that suffering can be permanently ended by ethical and spiritual means. The question is, what is that ethical and spiritual means? That is the Noble Eightfold Path. Firstly, one must acquire the right views. In Pali, it's called Samadhi. So acquiring the right views, but then that would simply become knowledge. We have to take it one step further. In other words, Samma Sankappa, which is to then resolve to turn around one's life in the light of those right views. These 2 form the wisdom component of the Noble Eightfold Path. And the Sanskrit word for it is prajna, in Pali it's panya. So you might extend that, not just wisdom in itself will not tell you, the acquisition of wisdom is very important. So therefore, These two represent that. Then comes the second component, which is Sila, which means morality in Pali, or Shila in Sanskrit. And of course, it means the cultivation of morality. How is karma or karma accrued to the individual? In other words, it can be through verbal actions, good or bad, physical actions, good or bad, mental actions, good or bad. All three are karma. Okay, so relatively the easiest is sammavacha, or right speech. Of course, there's a lot of explanations to that, but let's go through the list. That's all we have time for right now. Then sammakamanta, or right conduct, not to lie, not to steal, those kinds of things. Then samma ajiva, right livelihood, to engage in livelihood that is not harmful to other beings. And then sammavayama, right effort, in order to make the necessary effort that the Buddha points out very constantly and very beautifully, that there's no such thing as a moral holiday, that one must be vigilant about oneself, and therefore it's easier said than done, and therefore appropriately labeled right effort. Then the last two deal with the mind, namely Samadhi Meditation, or more properly, the practice of meditation. Sammasati, or right mindfulness, and ultimately Sammasamadhi, or right concentration. Right concentration is very important because you can get distracted, and therefore you need to focus on the goal of nibbana or nirvana, and therefore that concentration toward that goal is very important. Simply put, what Buddhism is pointing out is the acquisition of wisdom, the cultivation of morality, and the practice of meditation is the heartbeat of all spirituality. Anything else is besides the point. So also in Buddhism, there's no belief in either God, that is Ishvara, or a soul, Atma. There's belief in the doctrine of karma, a belief that it shares with its other two sister traditions of Hinduism and Jainism, of course, with its own angle to it. And once you believe in the doctrine of karma, you also believe in the doctrine of rebirth. Again, Buddhism has its own input on this. And ultimately, the exit from the cycle of births and deaths, exit from the cycle of samsara, and that is the goal of nirvana, or nibbana in Pali. Buddhism also rejects the caste system and also the Vedic teachings, something that it shares with Jainism in that regard. Buddhism was the religion of the majority of the Indian peoples from about 500 BC to about 1200 Common Era. The three great Buddhist kings in the religious history of India, Emperor Ashoka, whose reign was from 273 to 237 BC. He was the patron of the third Buddhist council in Pataliputra, modern Patna. The third council took place in the year 247 BC. And then the second great Buddhist emperor was Emperor Kanishka, whose reign was from 78 to 103 Common Era. And he patronized the fourth Buddhist council in Jalandhar, modern Jalandhar in Punjab, in the year 100 Common Era. And then the last greatest Buddhist king of India was Emperor Harshavardhana, as he was known, and whose reign was from 606 to 647. He patronized the fifth Buddhist council at Kanyakubja, or modern Kanauj, in the year 643 Common Era. Some of the great Buddhist masters, Buddhism is just not confined to the Buddha himself. There are many, many great Indian masters who intellectually augmented this extraordinary tradition. These These masters stretched from period from 200 BC all the way to 800 Common Era. Buddha Ghosha, Dharmapala, Buddha Datta, Nagarjuna, incredible personality. Aryadeva, Chandrakirti, Shantideva, Asanga, Vasubandhu, Dinaga, who was from Kanchipuram. Kanchipuram in Tamil Nadu was a major center of Buddhist learning, and Dinaga was a very important Buddhist logician. Dharmakirti, Shantarakshita, Kamalashila, Kumarjiva, and Bodhidharma. And notice the word etc. This list is not an exhaustive list. It's a very, very limited list that I'm showing you. Kumarjiva was from Kashmir. He left Kucha for China at the invitation of the Emperor of China at that point in time in the year 401 Common Era. And he undertook the monumental project of translating all the Mahayana Buddhist sutras from Sanskrit to Mandarin Chinese. And the Chinese were so impressed by the level of his translation that they gave him the title of Guoshe, which in Chinese means instructor of the nation. At the other end of India, from the state of Tamil Nadu, was the high monk Bodhidharma. Bodhidharma too left Kanchipuram, which was, I believe, the capital of the Pallava kings. And he headed for China and landed there in the year 475 Common Era in Guangdong area. And of course, he became the great master of the meditational tradition. Today, Bodhidharma is a sainted figure in Chinese Buddhism, in Korean Buddhism, in Japanese Buddhism, and in Vietnamese Buddhism. In other words, throughout the Mahayana Buddhist world. Also here, we have a picture of the ruins of the Nalanda Buddhist University, which operated for 8 centuries, from 400 to 1200 Common Era. The red colored ones are the Theravada Buddhist nations, Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Burma, Thailand, Laos, and Cambodia, and a very small area of southernmost Vietnam near the Mekong River Delta, where today Ho Chi Minh City is located. And of course, most of Vietnam is Mahayana, that's China, Korea, Japan, and Taiwan. And then in the case of Vajrayana Buddhism, you have Tibet, as you can see, Bhutan, Sikkim and Ladakh regions of India, Mongolia. And if you see to your extreme left, the northwestern region of the Caspian Sea, Kalmyk region of the Russian Federation. So many of the Mahayana sutras, such as the Lotus Sutra, the Diamond Sutra, and so on and so forth, the heritage of those 40 and odd Mahayana sutras, this is the place where they are said to have been taught by the Blessed Lord. Within a few centuries of its birth, the barefooted, shaven-headed missionaries of the Buddha had spread all over the then known civilized world. And they penetrated even further, from Lapland on the one side to the Philippine Islands on the other. They had spread wide within a few centuries of the Buddha's birth. And in India itself, the religion of the Buddha had at one time nearly swallowed up 2/3 of the population. The mere monk Gautama arose as the Blessed One, the Buddha, the enlightened one, the awakened one. Here is Prime Minister Modi paying his respects to the Bodhi tree at Bodh Gaya. And I think you can see in the background the then governor of Bihar, who is now the president of India, President Kovind. And further detailed courses on Buddhism will be given by me through the Vivekananda Yoga University.
Thank you so much, Professor Herbert. The first question that comes to mind is this, the eightfold path that you have delineated so beautifully. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit more about, how can we achieve this right view of reality, because in this three-part structure that is mentioned by the Buddha, it seems that there's right perception of things, and then there's speech and acts, and then you have meditation. And I'm wondering how does it all get integrated? Does one enforce the other? But what's the order of things? That's my first question to you.
Sure, because remember, Buddhism is, in that sense, very constitutionally very Indian. So, in that regard, like it shares that heritage with Hinduism and Jainism. In other words, you need to go and seek yourself a spiritual preceptor who is not only a wise person, but a virtuous person. Because remember, virtue and wisdom are the two wings of the individual that safely take it across the ocean of samsara into the safety of nirvana. So that's the whole agenda. So given that, then one needs to go and seek a spiritual preceptor where the teachings of the Buddha Dharma, both Buddhist ethics as taught in the Sutta Pitaka, or for instance in the Mahayana Sutras, or even the Vajrayana Tantras. So therefore you have that. And then Buddhist metaphysics, which is talked about in the Abhidharma. So therefore, all of these are important to know, and it's difficult to negotiate.
So it's with the help of someone who has basically walked the path, someone who knows which way they're going, who knows what has already been taught in the tradition, and then they sort of guide you into it, and it's sustained by continuous practice. And I like what you said earlier on, there's no moral holiday. Sometimes we take holidays in between for certain activities, and this is really interesting. There should be no moral holiday. So I'm really impressed by that. I think I should incorporate that as well in my regular practice. So I want to segue a little bit and talk about basically what ancient India was like. And can you underscore what is it about ancient India that would have fostered and allowed this rich substratum, which basically not just nourished Buddhism, but also various other indigenous multi-religious engagements? Because it seems like Buddhism was in dialogue with Jainism and with Hinduism, and as you said, that it definitely has common language, theological terms, but then the understanding of these terms is different, and it doesn't really accept the Vedas. So, but at the same time, there is space for what Dr. Sharma. Dr. Rita Sharma, who's the director of the Center for Dharma Studies, she says there's this, and I quote, she says, mimesis, there's this dialogue, and there's this cross-fertilization. So it seems like there's this substratum where there can be a contradiction, there's room to contradict, there is also room to engage, and also to accept. Can you talk a little bit more about what this substratum or what this context would have been like?
Sure, absolutely. First of all, it's a great question. See, people talk about, especially in the modern context, India is a great democracy and all that. Of course, they mean it in political terms. You have to understand that India has always been a spiritual democracy. So that it is that has made us into a political democracy. And therefore, spiritual democracy means not only to have one's own views, but to be tolerant of other people's views. And therefore, you had the Vaidika Dharma, the Hindu tradition, which allowed in their arena, because they were the first among these, that Jainism flourished and Buddhism flourished. Certainly there was what I would call extreme aspects of friction once in a while, but by and large, there was a spirit of enormous tolerance. And not only just tolerance, they engaged in debates with each other. Debate to the point of not getting onto each other physically, but to confine it to the verbal arena. which is what debate should be. In other words, they tolerated distinction and difference among them. Not only among them, we think Hinduism is a monolith, Jainism is a monolith, and Buddhism is not. No, there are subdivisions within each one of these traditions. So they debated within each other as they debated with each other. So, and this was all done, in fact, in the court of kings. And many times, the king or the ruling monarch was either, personally speaking, either a Buddhist, a Hindu, or a Jain. But that was besides the point. That many times within the court, they enjoyed this debate. They became, what to put it in Sanskrit terminology, they became tarkarasikas. Tarkarasikas, somebody who enjoys debate. So the kings themselves enjoyed this debate. And this goes back to the time of even the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, where King Janaka literally had these debates where Yagyavalkya came and debated and so on and so forth. And this tradition historically continued. So it is that spirit of tolerance in which they debated with each other, and this became really an art form in which you had not only metaphysicians, but grammarians and logicians all taking part in the debate. And it was something extraordinary. It was, this tradition went on for not 1 or 2 days. We are talking about at least 3,000 years. So this is the context in which you have to look at. And they wrote scholastic works. Each of these traditions have an enormous amount of scholastic literature where they criticized each other. And every time they criticized each other, they would, the doctrines would get articulated and fine-tuned because the opponent criticized them, and they knew they had to sharpen their dialectical skills and so on and so forth. So that is the extraordinary heritage of India, where these traditions sort of grew up together in a healthy debate. And that's why at one point in time, Max Muller writes, I believe in one place, he says, India is a home of Hinduism and the birthplace of Buddhism and the refuge of Zoroastrianism. So you had traditions even from the outside coming and seeking refuge in the Indian soil. And that is the extraordinary greatness of India. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is really fascinating, and it's amazing to even hear about this, because it's a debate. It's not a regular debate. It's a scholarly debate. There are texts that come out of this. Doctrine gets shaped, and I don't want to use doctrine in the Christian sense, but but theologies get shaped. The way you view society gets shaped, and it's just this rich engagement. And Dr. Sharma, in that article, she also she calls the ancient Indian context an open ecosystem of religions. Where there's this rich engagement, and cultures kind of. There's this cross current of cultures, this flow of information that goes back and forth. Can you talk more a little bit about what religious identity was like in ancient India? Because now, in the West, this is becoming increasingly popular. There are people who are, even some of my students, when I'm teaching, they claim a multi-religious belonging.
The thing is this, I'm not going to tell anybody in terms of that you ought not to practice what is become almost the hallmark of modern religiosity, saying you can practice multiple religions at the same time. That's their business, okay? What I'm talking about is in the ancient context. The beauty of ancient India was these people held their own. They held their own subsect belief. Forget about their main tradition. If you were a Mahayana Buddhist, in India, particularly, you were either Yogacara or Madhyamika, as the case may be. You held your own, you criticized the others, but that did not mean you chased the other guy out of town. No, you didn't do that. So you respected him. In fact, in the debate, when debates took place, you addressed your opponent. He was not your enemy, he was your opponent, okay? Your intellectual opponent. And you addressed him as Mananiya Prativadi Mahodaya. That means what a respectful term that is. That is my respectful great opponent. Okay. So that is the way in which they addressed each other, holding their own. So it was not this kind of religious, what I would call fluid identity that went all over the place and you didn't know which tributary that you were getting into. No, they had their own identity, yet they were deeply, deeply respectful, barring a few incidents here and there. It did take place, religious frictions did take place, but that was really few and far between. The majority of the religious history of India was quite tolerant in that regard, and that is important to know. They held their own, but were deeply respectful of the other viewpoints.
So what I'm hearing is you're saying is that there was room for them to contradict and at the same time assert their own identities.
Absolutely.
And they weren't like just blending into the other. They knew exactly what their position was.
Right.
That's what I'm hearing. And but then at the same time, from what I've read, it seems like you could be both and. You could be there were some people in ancient India who were practicing Buddhism, but at the same time also following Hinduism in their day-to-day practice, performing certain puja, so on and so forth.
Sure, absolutely. See, what happened was this. At the popular level, you had that kind of fluidity because the ordinary man on the street is not what I would call a fine-tuned intellectual who has to keep, putting the screwdriver to his head to tighten his doctrines. No, that's not
Yeah.
how the ordinary man on the street is. Even today, they are not like that. So what if, you can sometimes have interreligious marriages. My wife belongs to religion A, I belong to religion B. So what? That's the kind of what you would call popular fluidity. And that's wonderful. And that sort of keeps sometimes this kind of popular fluidity keeps the intellectuals in checks without going bonkers at the other end. So therefore, I think they sort of balance each other off quite well. In order to be, in other words, the fluidity shouldn't become so much in which, everybody is everything to everybody else. So no, and ultimately you end up being nothing to nobody. So that's not the point. On the other hand, you have that intellectual, what have you, fine tuning and doctrinal, articulation. That's the best term to use. So therefore you had that, but at the same time you had this, and I think that's sort of the popular mode and the intellectual mode. They have been part and parcel of the Indian religious fabric. And I'm glad that they do it that way, because it reminds me like the pedals of the bicycle. One pedal is always up and the other pedal is down. And that's how, when you press it up and down, the cycle starts to move, right? But if both pedals are up, you are in trouble. If both pedals are down, you're in trouble. So that's how I view the popular and the intellectual, one going up and down, and then ultimately the civilization itself gets moving and hopefully the proper direction.
So I have another question for you, and it is related to the adaptability of Buddhism. It seems like Buddhist culture has really flourished, and you had that beautiful map, showing how it has flourished in various geographies and in various situations, in various contexts. What would you say is the central aspect or Buddhism, or what is it about Buddhism itself that makes it so adaptable, so malleable, that that it has been incorporated into various situations?
Sure. See, first of all, it's the missionary zeal within the Buddha Dharma that was there right from the start. The Buddhist monastics then said we need to take the Buddha Dharma outside. Of course, there was imperial patronage, as we saw in the case of Emperor Ashoka, Emperor Kanishka, and also Emperor Harsha. So, given all of that, then it is that zeal that then made them take it outside. We have to understand Buddhism was, if I may use the term, the oldest of all the missionary religions, taking it in different places. And then in the West, it has come only since about, I would say, the 17th, sorry, not the 17th, 18th century, where it went into Europe. Some of the intellectuals of Europe started to adopt, look into Buddhism very seriously, both in Britain, in France, in Germany, and so on and so forth, and then eventually in the United States. So, and then it just didn't get confined to the intellectual community, especially in the United States. It has become quite populist. It's very fashionable to say I'm Buddhist. And the way some of the Buddhist masters, whether you're talking about they are Japanese Buddhist monastics, or Korean Buddhist monastics, or Tibetan Buddhist monastics, Vietnamese, the famous Thich Nhat Hanh, who passed away earlier this month. These were extraordinary people who came and spread the Buddha Dharma in the United States, and the Thai Buddhist monks also there. And they had all the flags of the Buddhist countries from all the Buddhist nationalities, and the flag of the Republic of India was right in the center, because they knew that India was the land of Buddhism. And as one of them put it, India is the land of the Buddha, and it is a special place in the hearts of us Buddhists. That said it all to me.
I have been initiated into the Shakhtar tradition, which is, as you know, it's the theology and the theology rather, because she's the goddess, and the goddess Mahadevi, and in the Devi Atharva Shirsham, one of the right in the beginning, it goes. It starts explaining and says all the gods and the goddesses, they come to the great goddess and they say, "Who are you?" And then she answers back and she says, "Aham Brahma Swarupini, Martha Prakrita Purushatmakam Jagata, Shunyam Cha, Shunyam Cha." And so that Shunya is of personal interest to me. And I was wondering if you can say something about Shunyata, because I'm in the process of publishing something, and in that I articulate on the basis of this text, the Devi Atharva Shirsham, that she is both, that all of reality is both Shunya and Ashunya. And then of course in that same chant, that same mantra, she says, "I'm both Vijnana, Vijnano, I'm both knowing and ignorance," and of course without getting too much into the Sanskrit. She says she's the Panchabhutas, and also not the Panchabhutas. So she's basically reconciling everything. And what I articulate in my forthcoming monograph is that she is both the trans-categorical, the pre-categorical, and the categorical. So all of these. So basically I'm including Shunyata in it. I'm wondering if you can say a little bit about, maybe your perspective even on Shunyata.
Sure. Shunya, first of all, in terms of this kind of scenario that you just now described, that she is jnana and she's ajnana, and she is the Panchabhutas and not the, that is there throughout the Indian tradition, whether you're talking about Shakta, Vaishnava, or Shaiva. Because in the case of, if you look at the Vishnu Sahasranama, Shunya is one of the names of Vishnu. Okay, so
Right.
all right. So now, given this, this is no surprise, because the reason is God, if we're looking at it in the theistic aspects of the Indian tradition, which is what Shaivism, Vaishnavism, and Shaktaism do, God or Paramatma is looked upon as Viruddha Dharma Ashraya. He is the abode of contradictory attributes. So that is how you have to view this aspect. And that is how it's also depicted in the iconography. See, if you look at, for instance, the image of Vishnu, he's seated, he's sleeping on the serpent, the cosmic serpent Adishesha. And then you have also the eagle, Garuda, which is vehicle. You know, eagle and snakes are dead enemies to each other. So therefore, with that iconography, God becomes the reconciler of opposites, the Viruddha Dharma Ashraya. Okay, so you got that. So therefore, at another level, the word shunya, people think of shunya as being zero or nihilism. That's not what that's a surface meaning. Here, in all it means, as the Madhyamika tradition, because the Madhyamika tradition is also known as Shunyavada, of which the founder was Nagarjuna, the greatest of the Buddhist philosophers of the Indian Madhyamika Shunyavada tradition. See, all it means is the phenomena, which is the world that is known through our five sense organs and the mind. All phenomena are ultimately empty. In other words, they do not have an enduring reality. So shunya has to be understood in those terms. Otherwise, it cannot be, the reality cannot be described in human language. It is beyond the ken of the senses and the mind. And that's why Brahman too in the Upanishads is described as what? Is something that is beyond the ken of the senses and the mind. Yato vacho nivartante aprapya manasasaha. Even with the mind, it cannot grasp it, because it is the pure subject on the other one. The moment you try to objectify it, it ceases to be Brahman. So at the same time, the source of the universe itself is Brahman. So it is difficult to define. That's why it's avachya. You cannot describe it in human vocabulary. So it cannot be described. It is anirvachaniya. It cannot be described in human terms. I know Maya also is talked about as anirvachaniya. So therefore, the word shunya is not mere emptiness. How to understand, I hate to use the English translation emptiness, but that's all I have. After all, we're dialoguing in English and not in Greek or Italian. So therefore, I have to use. So therefore, the term shunya has to be understood as that which is beyond relative reality, that which cannot be described. In other words, where all phenomena become ultimately meaningless in the greater unity of things. If that is one understanding of shunya, I think one has got some idea of what it might be.
Would you say that meaninglessness, or that state of nothingness, is a state of potentiality, or is a state that is the ultimate state? Would you say?
It's ultimate, that cannot be understood in human thought or vocabulary. It's ineffable. It is indescribable. That's the best way to put it. And therefore, it is known only through anubhava or experience. And that's where, without sounding too high and mighty, I'd like to leave it there.
Okay. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. I know we can go on, and I can definitely cite more from the same David Rashid, but I think this is great. And I'm wondering if you can share something from Buddhist tradition that we can take away, that our viewers can take away, and maybe incorporate it in their daily practice.
Sure. I know it sounds a little bit vicarious if I were to say, we need to all calm down and sort of practice mindfulness, which of course, as you said, you can do that in any place, in yoga studios or whatever the case may be, practice yoga or meditation. Sure, that's fine. But if you are looking for spiritual answers, there's of course the doctrine of karma is one aspect, and of course I don't want to get into that, it's going to take, but in practical terms, practice loving kindness, help out each other. There is no other way in this. That's the only sense of genuine ethics and selflessness that you can practice, is to be practical with what you would call in Buddhist terminology, in Pali, you call it metta bhavana or maitreya bhavana, to have the sense of understanding, of compassion, help out. I know everybody cannot help out every particular situation. To the extent that you can alleviate the sorrow or the discomfort a particular friend is experiencing during this pandemic period, in what way you can help that person uh, within your limited capacity in terms. And sometimes I know one feels so tied up. What can I do? Even if I have the good intention of trying to be helpful or practice loving kindness towards another human being, I cannot because I have limited resources. I'm saying, no, don't go through these extraordinary means, but therefore, to the extent in your little neighborhood, in your whatever little area and jurisdiction that you can practice this, that itself will bring you a lot of peace and comfort. And once you feel that sense of peace and comfort within you, it will take you longer in terms of your realization of, if you want to call it, a sort of spiritual positivity, if that is what you're looking for. And there's no easy solution to this. I don't pretend that there is an easy solution to this. And I'm not going to sit and become some kind of a spiritual guru that I know it all. No, at all. I too probably am going through this. And the only way is I go and seek the advice of our venerable monks who come from all the Asian Buddhist nationalities in our organization, the International Buddhist Association of America. And I seek comfort in what they have to say and help them out. Sometimes going to a Buddhist monastery to help them out itself involves you in that practical scheme of things where you're trying to seek that level of comfort. And sometimes the Buddhist monastics, they don't have to say anything. Just looking at them and practicing meditation itself will calm you down 2000%, if I may even use that. I don't know whether I'm mathematically correct. Probably there's no such thing as 2000%, but anyway, you get the point. I hope I got the point across in trying to get something.
Yes, you did. I think what you're trying to say is that in helping others, we sort of help ourselves, and we are basically just renewing ourselves. And sometimes I'm sure just being in the presence of these Buddhist monks who have been practicing for so long, I'm sure they just have this super calming presence. But not just them. I think doing something for someone else is always beneficial. It takes you out of your silo, and just in this space where you're constantly thinking just only of yourself. You're self-centered. And thank you for sharing that wisdom
A
nugget.
very small anecdote in that regard. I will not tell you. She's a Buddhist bhikkhuni or nun of some Asian nationality, and I regard she's sort of a very motherly figure. I respect her a great deal, and she goes out sometimes in the middle of the night at 2 a.m., 3 a.m. to go and give comfort to a elderly person or who needs help and so on and so forth. And I asked her, I said, Venerable, at 2 a.m. in the morning, at 3 a.m. in the morning, suppose somebody attacks you and you're alone, you're an elderly nun yourself. Don't you feel afraid? And she very calmly looked at me and she said, so what? I have lived long enough. Even as a man, I didn't have the guts to say that. And she, as an elderly, she put me to shame. And she rightly did so. And I'm thankful for that wonderful, calming spiritual advice that she said with those beautiful, soft words. So what? I have lived long enough. She was more interested in helping others rather than looking after her own safety. I'm not saying that anybody should do that, but within your own confines, you can still help out people and feel very good about it.
I'm wondering if you can leave us with a book recommendation or perhaps even a website that our viewers can look at or read from and grow.
Let me give you a few, 4 or 5 books that come to mind. You have Buddhist India by T.W. Rice Davids. You have Indian Buddhism by A.K. Warder. Then you have The Golden Age of Indian Buddhist Philosophy by Professor Westerhoff. And then also The Studies in the Origins of Buddhism by Professor G.C. Pandey, and the Buddhistic studies in the Buddhistic cultures of Buddhistic culture of India, excuse me, by Professor Lalmani Joshi. So there are many others. I don't want to sound like a walking version of the university library card catalog, but you get the point.
This is wonderful. It's been amazing to have you and to talk to you. If I ever find myself in the DC area, I will definitely get in touch and we can talk more about Shunyata over coffee or your favorite beverage. Dr. Heber, I wish you well, and all of our viewers, I wish you also well. It has been an absolute pleasure. On behalf of the Embassy of India in Washington, D.C. and the India Student Hub, I thank you for your time. And Dr. Heber, I thank you for your wonderful presentation. And I'm Dr. Praveena Rodriguez signing off. It's been a pleasure. Stay safe to all of our viewers. Namaste and Jai Hind.
May I say a few words?
Please.
Thank you for this interview, Dr. Rodriguez. As our Buddhist monastics always say the blessing, Sukhi Hotu, it's Pali. May you be well and may you be safe. And may I say also that in taking refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, which is all that we Buddhists usually take these precepts. I thank you for this great opportunity to share the Buddha Dharma with you, and also thank the Embassy of India. And I also please request the students at any point in time to reach out to me and academically to sort of help them out in whatever way that I can in the context of all of this. With that, I thank you once again.
Thank you, Dr. Heber. Thank you also for your blessing.
And so therefore, namaste.
Namaste.